The NFC North today. Let's start off with maybe the favorite in the conference, the Detroit Lions. Their win total is set at 10.5. They're plus 130 to win the NFC North, plus 1,200 to win the Super Bowl, all courtesy of Bally Bet. Last season, the Lions snapped a 32-year streak without a playoff win and look primed to contend against all of the NFC. Does this team make another step forward and actually win the NFC this season?
Yeah, I think there's a possibility. I know there's a lot of bullishness on the Lions this year, and it does make sense. So, kind of my thoughts on the Lions last year. They had a great season, obviously, and the playoffs were great. But in the regular
Hmm.
season, I don't think a lot of people remember that towards the end in December, they were kind of a team I was looking to bet against from a game to game perspective.
Yeah.
Their defense was a little bit suspect, especially in the secondary. And then there was also some opportunities to bet against Jared Goff in outdoor games in the cold where he historically struggles. However, this offseason, they improved the secondary, draft a couple corners early on. They just improved the defense in general. Like it should be a better unit because of the talent. You also have to like for the Lions this year, if you want to be a buyer on Detroit, that 14 of their 17 regular season games are indoor. So that does help Jared Goff quite a bit. And then most importantly, they were able to keep Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, who I thought for sure was going to be a top head coach candidate for one of the teams in the market for a head coach, but they were able to keep him in Detroit for one more year. And I think that's huge, especially for their regular season prospect. So I'm expecting another strong regular season for Detroit. I do think they're priced correctly where 10.5 is right and a favorite position to be to win the division, but not quite odds on because there is a pretty good teams behind them who definitely have upside in my opinion. I don't know what it's going to look like in the playoffs. So in terms of the big picture stuff, I would probably hold back on betting Detroit because we all saw what they did in the playoffs last year. There's not going to be much value from a futures perspective on Detroit, but definitely a team I think will have a strong regular season and that Ben
Sure.
Johnson getting him back is just massive for this team who I thought maybe after how they played last year, it could be a team I could continue selling from a game to week or week to week perspective.
All right, let's switch it over to the Green Bay Packers. In total is set at 9.5. They're plus 210 to win the NFC North and plus 1,800 to win the Super Bowl, all courtesy of Bally Bet. It was a slow start to the Jordan Love era in Green Bay, but him and Matt LaFleur and they got together and had a pretty good season towards the end of the season, especially. What do you make of the Packers this season with some heightened expectations and got a playoff win last year?
Yeah, it was a good end for the season. That's what makes it hard for me to decide what to do with them. I mean, last
Hmm.
year their offense really struggled at times, especially early in games, like first half. And when you think of Matt Lafleur and how he's done in his career, especially with Aaron Rodgers, it was always like really good game scripts. Like the first 25
Yeah.
plays were awesome. They just couldn't figure it out last year, and then eventually they did figure it out in December, and they kind of needed to figure it out because their defense then took a big step back where they lost games to Tommy DeVito and lost a home game to Baker Mayfield in a cold weather game against Tampa Bay. The next week on Christmas Eve, they let Bryce Young have the best game of his career in a rookie season where he was pretty much miserable for throughout. So it was like from weeks 14 to 16, that was like this defense can't stop those quarterbacks. If they do make the playoffs, they're going to have a lot of trouble. And then they end up getting in the playoffs with wins against the Vikings and Bears to end the season. And not only they get in, but they upset the Cowboys in that wild card Sunday game, and then they almost go to San Francisco and beat a team that was well rested off a bye and probably should have won that game. I mean, a few bounces, and Green Bay is playing in the NFC Championship in Green or in Detroit. And who knows? I mean, I would have probably been interested in betting Green Bay in that game just with how they were trending. So it's kind of a challenge now to decide are the Packers what they were to end the season, or did they kind of get hot and play at like their highest level possible, and they maybe will come back? I think if you want to spin some positives for Green Bay, they do have a new defensive coordinator. Was not a fan at all of Joe Barry, and I'm sure Packers fans have not been a fan of him, and probably one of the reasons why they didn't win more Super Bowls with Aaron Rodgers and maybe have a little bit better of a season last year. So you have bring in Jeff Hafley, who actually was the head coach of Boston College, one of the guys who didn't want to deal with the NIL and the recruiting stuff in college football and just wanted to call football plays. So he found a home in Green Bay as their defensive coordinator. So I have to think that's going to be a positive for a Packers defense that does have a lot of talent, but probably was undercoached the last few seasons. And then the Packers offense has a lot of young weapons around Jordan Love at the wide receiver position. So there's a chance that some of those guys like Dobbs and Reed and Watson still have some
Hmm.
ceiling or potential to reach that we haven't realized yet. So in terms of Green Bay
Yeah.
in betting, I mean, their win total last year was 7.5. They went over that. Now it's 9.5. That's a pretty big jump. I think it's an appropriate jump. So I'm going to take a neutral approach on them. But I'm definitely going to closely watch that week 1 game in Brazil against the Eagles and try to learn a few things from Green Bay on whether I should buy or sell them going forward.
Yeah, it's a good first week test for them. All right, Nate,
Yeah.
a team that is near and dear to both of our hearts, the Chicago Bears. Their win total is set at 8.5, plus 325 to win the NFC North, and plus 3,500 to win the Super Bowl. All thanks to Bally Bet. The Bears have a lot of hype surrounded by number one overall pick Caleb Williams. They were on Hard Knocks. Is this Chicago team going to make the playoffs this season?
Yeah, I think they could, but they are. They're going to have to start off fast because the schedule
Yeah,
is pretty crazy how hard it is later in the season, but a little bit more favorable early in the season. I mean, the first 9 games, you play teams in the AFC South, which I think is a good division, but there's not like a true elite team where there's a sure loss
yeah,
against one of those. And then you also play the Panthers, Commanders, Cardinals, and Patriots within the first 10 weeks. You have a London game and a bye. But it's a definitely a schedule where you're probably going to need to go 6-3 because if you look at the back half of the
okay,
schedule, you play all 6 of your division opponents, plus you have a trip to the 49ers, and then you host the Seahawks on a Thursday night short week in week 17. And those short weeks later in the season are always tougher because of some of the injury situations where players are playing hurt. So Bears are going to have to start off fast if they are going to want to make the playoffs. It's definitely a fun offense, inserting Caleb Williams, the starting quarterback. You bring in Keenan Allen, you draft Roman Dunze to wide receiver group that already has DJ Moore. So a really fun opportunity to have really 3 really good receivers for a team that has had a lot of trouble finding a 1 and a 2 the last few years. My concern though with the Bears is their defense. They got a nice established defensive end through a trade midseason, Montez Sweat, who helped that defense a lot play better down the stretch. There's also some nice pieces in the secondary that they drafted lately, but that's just some worry about if you look at their depth chart, what else they have on the defensive line. I'm a little bit worried about their run defense and also just rushing the passer if a team with a good offensive tackle is able to contain Sweat. So the defense
yeah,
is kind of the key for me to see if they can take a big step because I think the Bears offense actually is going to be fine, even though they have a rookie running the show. If you wanted to bet
yeah,
over on the Bears or something positive on the Bears, I think you kind of missed the boat. There was much better numbers earlier in the offseason before all the offseason hype, and then the hard knocks bump probably gave the
yeah,
team in terms of in the betting market. So I think if you want to buy them, maybe you can bet on them in some individual games early on. But if you're looking to sell them, I actually would wait to see how they do early on in the season because I do think there's an opportunity that
mhm,
they are able to get some wins, and then maybe as the schedule gets harder, there's an opportunity to sell the Bears.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a team that obviously is very interesting and a very fun division in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe one of the best divisions in football. All right, let's wrap it up here with the Minnesota Vikings. Their win total is set at 6.5. They're plus 900 to win the NFC North and plus 8,000 to win the Super Bowl, all courtesy of Bally Bet. The Vikings have prepared for life after Kirk Cousins signing Sam Darnold and drafting J.J. McCarthy, but unfortunately, McCarthy will miss the entire season with a meniscus tear. What are your expectations for the Vikings this season?
Yeah, so I actually think there's a chance to buy low on the Vikings here at a win total of 6.5. I do like the coaching staff a lot.
Mhm.
Kevin O'Connell, head coach, good offensive mind, has kind of proven that last year he could win with not great quarterbacks or at least have offenses that can move the ball with Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins after Cousins went down. So I was kind of impressed by the way O'Connell was kind of was able to overcome the adversity, especially since Jefferson, the star wide receiver, missed a lot of the season.
Yeah,
I also like Brian Flores, a defensive coordinator. He is super aggressive, but they did have some strong showings last year. It's aggressive in terms of
yeah,
blitzing, which maybe is a good thing on a team that's going to probably struggle to generate pressure rushing for. I do believe in Sam Darnold, and I don't know. I know that might be funny to some, but I do think that he's an okay quarterback in this scheme with the weapons around him. whether it's Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and then eventually, hopefully for the Vikings, TJ Hawkinson when he comes back from the season ending injury he had late last year. If you look at Sam Darnold, I know it wasn't very good with the Jets, or probably terrible for the Jets given where he was drafted. The Panthers, he was okay, but he was never part of their future plans. Then he goes to the 49ers last year. He sits behind Brock Purdy, learns the Kyle Shanahan offense. And I think that's really important because Kyle Shanahan's offense is similar to what O'Connell runs in Minnesota because Shanahan and McVay kind of run similar offenses, and O'Connell was a former offensive coordinator for Sean McVay. So I do think this offense does suit him, especially with Justin Jefferson getting a lot of the targets. And they signed him the first day of free agency before they were thinking about who they were going to draft at quarterback. So I thought Sam Darnold was going to kind of start anyway. And the reason why they signed him is because they believed he'd be the week one starter. So McCarthy, I think, is the kind of was a project anyway. And if Darnold was going to play well, he was going to play a majority of the snaps this season. So Vikings over 6.5 is something I would consider. And I also bet on them in week one against the Giants, a team I'm low on, but I'm also kind of higher on the Vikings than this win total indicates. I think that 7 or 8
Okay.
wins is very doable for a Minnesota team. I think is a
Sure.
little bit undervalued at the moment.
Okay. All right, Nate. There are three heavy hitters atop the league. You said the Vikings are going to be an interesting team. Who wins the NFC North?
Yeah, I'll just go with the Lions here. I just think from a regular season
Okay.
perspective, they're going to be really good. Maybe the Packers have a little bit of a higher upside because Jordan Love could take a huge leap. And I think we kind of know what Jared Goff is at his ceiling. But I just
Hmm.
like the Lions in the regular season, 14 games indoors. So that helps out Goff quite a bit. And also Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator, who I think will take this offense with Jameer Gibbs, Amon St. Raw, really good offensive line, kind of to another level potentially. And then defensively, I like what they fixed, and you have already a good pass rusher and Hutchinson, and
Yeah.
you shore up
Yeah.
the interior with DJ Reader, and then kind of improve the secondary through the draft. So I do think the Lions are the class of this division, at least in the regular season. But there is definitely some upside from the teams behind them, and honestly, I wouldn't be
Definitely.
surprised if any of the teams ended up making the playoffs in this division.